So thank you for having me. I'm here as a substitute because I think in the first place the National Youth Council of Austria was asked to come here, but they're really busy at the moment, so I hope I can still give you an entertaining and interesting input. And excuse my Austrian dialect, I hope you get me, you don't feel too much like in an action movie. Huh? What I want to present you is our association. We're working in the field of civic education with youngsters, with kids, in schools, out of schools, and also with grown-ups. We're doing teacher training, so we're directly in the classrooms working with the people there. I want to give you a short overview of what happened in Austria, because in Austria the voting age is 16 on all levels. And the short conclusion is we're still standing. Yeah. But I give you this in a little bit more in detail. In the very end, if I have some time, there was a lot of talk about how can we create interest and concernment of young people due to politics, and I have a short input, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and this in a lot of cases helps to increase interest in politics within 10 minutes with youngsters. So if we have time, we do this, okay? As you said, I'm working in an independent association. We're like bottom-up formed, and our association is called Sapere Aude. It's Latin, and this is like one of the, it's from Kant, the philosopher, and it's one of the headlines of Enlightenment. And we liked the idea of Sapere Aude, which means, in my words, use your own head, don't let others think for you. I'm working for this association. We're doing civic education, participation projects with all types of people in Austria. And I'm also teaching at the university in my hometown in Linz, and I'm doing, giving lectures there. Sapere Aude Association for Active Citizenship Education. I want to start with how we started, because it's directly linked to lowering the voting age, more or less, okay? In 2008, this was the time when there was the first national elections where 16 and 17-year-olds were allowed to vote. And most of us, we were like friends, more or less. We were not directly linked to any political party. We were just like citizens. And we had some sleepless nights, because in the media there were this idea, really, really dominant. The media and some public players, they were saying young people are not mature enough to vote. And then we said, we don't know how this works out with young people. We don't know. We are not in the classrooms. We don't know it. But we had like an idea or a thought or an attitude. Because we said, if youngsters are not mature enough to vote, give them opportunities to change that. And it's not only the duty of the young people to get interested, but it's also a public duty to get youngsters to vote. We need to make an effort as society. And we said, when you talk about politics, you may talk about, I don't know, a nuclear power plant being an explosion in Fukushima, nuclear power plant, terrorist attacks. It's a really delicate issue. When you talk about politics, it's not easy. It's not easy to teach media literacy, fake news and all this stuff, and empowering people. So we need to organize citizenship education. This is what we call it. You can also call it civic education. You need to organize that on a high level. We are doing political education try to do it for all youngsters, so also those who drop out of school, unemployed youngsters, and all people. For example, I also go to the jailhouses and work with the imprisoned people there. And you need to work with them on a long term. For example, there were these terrorist attacks in 2015 and 2016. And then there was some initiatives, also some funding from some ministries. And you had the opportunity, you get paid for having a workshop. And the idea of the workshop was to fight extremist views, not go to jihad, to Syria, to all of the stuff. The only thing was, the only duty of the organizations taking part was you were only allowed to work with the group of youngsters, the class, for 4 hours. This will not work. If you have jihadist people, Nazi people sitting in there, you cannot change their views within 4 hours. So work with them on a long term. And then we said we want to focus on methods, on basic conflict lines in society, because there are some basic conflict lines in society and they will show up every 5 years, and you will see similarities. And you cannot be completely up to date with all of the issues, and how many members the Austrian parliament will have, if it's 183 or 187, it's not that important. So what's this? This is what we do. So we're doing also training of teachers and multipliers, and we're doing this kind of exchange projects together also with the National Austrian Youth Councils. We've been in Norway 6 to 7 years ago. We've been in Slovenia, and we share our subjective views from different youth groups which we're working with. Okay. This is just a picture because I think to pep up PowerPoint presentations, pictures are always good. And here you see in the bubbles what we want to achieve with the youngsters. So we want to teach them self-reliance. Have your own views, not believe what your teachers tell you, what the peer group tells you, but think of your own, okay? I'm coming to this kind of Austrian story, which is a little bit special, I think, because we've been one of the only countries that lowered the voting age at all levels. How did this came? So far, there was more or less a consensus of all political parties that it's okay. They did, I think, some bargaining with other laws to lower the voting age. And there was also the will to say, let the youngsters not just vote, but give them aid, give them projects, give them support on different levels, and also in schools and out of schools, youth workers and so on. There was a big campaign by the Ministry of Education. It was called Essentialist You, and it started a year before the first national-wide elections happened, where 16 and 17 years old were allowed to vote. And there was enough budget for external democracy projects, for initiatives like us. The basic funding in the very beginning we got from this ministry and from this initiative. And of course, as we heard this morning earlier, there was of course a call for more citizenship or civic education to get the people, the youngsters, informed and interested. So what is this? This is the public discussions with several cons and pros. It was too quick, but I think we heard all of this. I'm not sure, how can I turn it back? Idazi? Tagazi? Tagazi? Tagazi. Okay, I was too quick, but I think I was that quick. This was like male intuition, because you heard all of these pros and cons before. I think it's more or less the same discussion that you have in all of the other countries. When I was here for the first hour, I felt a little bit like in a time machine. Okay. So here you have a timeline. In Austria, in the year 2000, the first we started to lower the voting age on a local level and on a regional level in some federal states. And then in 2007 there was this big electoral reform where we also put it up on a national level. So still the active voting right is 16 and the passive one is 18. So if you want to run for a parliament, you need to be 18 years old. This was also lowered. Then there was this kind of big campaign, and the first national-wide elections, followed by the first elections for the European Parliament, where 16 and 17 years old were allowed to vote, 2009. I studied political science, but I'm working in schools, and I feel more like a social worker or a teacher. But I'm not a scientist, but I still brought you some facts and figures from this period, okay? I'm too quick, Tagasi, I learn quickly. Here you see our association. It's in Vienna, and the first regional elections in Vienna, where the voting age was lowered, was in 2008, and on the national level on 2005 in Vienna, and 2008 national-wide. Okay, and here you see some facts and figures concerning the interest in politics, and we compare it also to the year before, where youngsters didn't have the voting right so far. So what you can see, especially in the first and second branch, very interested and fairly interested, is that compared to the years before, when the youngsters didn't have the voting right, there's a clear uprise. Okay, so when you can say, in this case, in this very first years, youngsters, together with the chance to vote, they got more interested. Then I have another fact and figure concerning the turnout, also on these local elections in Vienna, 2005. Here in the blue spot is the turnout, the overall turnout, and the red one, the red side, is the turnout among 16 and 17 years old. So you see it's almost alike, 2% difference. And then, what is this? This is a little bit German, so I need to help you. What you see here is the turnout. The turnout in Vienna 5 years afterwards, in 2010, it was analyzed, and you see the overall turnout among age groups. So you see on the left side you see 16. So this is among 100% how many 16 years old went to vote, how many 17 years old, and it continues until the age of 25. So what you can see here is a little dropout between the age of 16, where it's a little bit higher, and then you see a drop down until the age of 20. And then it's more or less constantly. I think some of my colleagues just said important idea is to get youngsters the idea that voting is a habit, and then if you vote for 1 or 2 times, it stays a habit. You can see this in the analysis as well, because if you then go up the age rank, 26, 27, and so on, it's more or less constantly. Next figure. It was also analyzed who are the groups that are less likely to go to vote when it comes to the new voting youngsters. You can here see what happens when both parents were born in Austria, when one person, at least one person, one parent was not born in Austria, how this is linked to the turnout. Here we're talking of the turnout, okay? And so you can see here that if you have parents that are not born in Austria, it's more likely that you don't go to vote, even if you have the voting right. And then there is another group that is less likely to go to vote. And this has to do with education, formal education. So if there are young people that are working, including apprentices, it's a little bit less turnout than when you compare it with youngsters at the same age that are pupils or that are students. More clearly, you can see it here when it comes to the Vienna election in 2005. So, what are the learnings? I need to prepare you now. This is subjective. I'm not a scientist. I'm just a teacher. I'm doing civic education, and yeah, I'm also a citizen of Austria. What can we learn from the case of my home country, from Austria? What we could see here is that participation in the first election has an impact on one's voting career. It was clearly seen in one of the figures that if you get people 2 times to vote, the chance that they stay voters, it's clearly higher than you vote only 1 time or you never vote. If you create it as a habit, you have a good chance that if you're a grandfather or a grandmother, you still go to vote when you did it 2 times. Next one, voting is a habit. This is a little bit of overview of impact factors that keep you go to vote or that make you abstain. Of course, that's logical: family, friends, peers, media, schools, and so on. I'm not here with what is the public opinion now. What impacts did this lowering the voting age have on public discussion and the society in Austria? What you can clearly say is young voters became a target group for political parties. It was a fresh impact for citizenship education in school. We got a new curriculum. There are different school types. Not every school type is having citizenship education as an own subject, but it's getting more and more slowly. And it's also linked citizenship education now on universities, because we have a professorship in Vienna only dealing with this case. In this time period, a lot of NGOs came up that tried to foster citizenship education. And when I glance through the newspapers and the online media now, because when I did prepare for this meeting here, I tried to look it up. Voting at 16 is no longer in public discussion. It became normal. It's not a big issue any longer. Sometimes when I go to school and I ask maybe 16-year-olds or 18-year-olds, should younger people vote, they say no. But the funny thing is, if you ask 16 years old, should 14 years old vote, they say no. And if you ask 18 years old, should 16 years old vote, they say no. So it's kind of magic. What are ongoing challenges for us in Austria, or maybe also for you guys? One of the main things is, I think we also heard that before, is how can we advocate issues of young interests? How can we pick up issues that really, really interest young people? How can we raise the consciousness that political decisions, they have an impact on young lives? How can we do this? And then, as I mentioned in the very beginning, teaching civic society, talking about politics, it's not easy. And how can we aid teachers and youth workers to get professional vocational trainings and to keep them up to date? For example, the field of civic citizenship education, it's never ever a closed subject. Always new things happen. What can you do? How can you be up to date? How can we go for the less interested and those with no right to vote? This is also one thing we are constantly asking ourselves as association. You may imagine that in Vienna there live 1.8 million people, and in Vienna 1.1 million people have a right to vote. So we have 25% of the people that live in Vienna with no right to vote. How can we activate them for politics? One other thing is, how can we still take care of the older ones, the 18 years, 20, 25-year-olds? They then go out, in Austria, they go out of school at the age of 18, 19, 20, and then you cannot reach them that easily as if they were in schools. What can we do then? And then I imagine a young head, I imagine my young head 10 years ago when I was at that age. You have other things in your mind. Should I build a family? Which kind of job should I take? And then in this situation, to create interest in politics in another thing where you are really busy, of course, I think it's even more difficult. I'm almost finished. And feel free to ask me questions afterwards. I told you before that I think in this kind of PowerPoint presentations, it's always good to use pictures. So you have some pictures here in the way we work. We work really interactively. And the second look I have for you is, I promised you, if we have 3 more minutes, yes, this one trick, how can you pretty easily, with most of the people, raise concern or interest for politics. Okay. We imagine that we are now in a classroom in Austria. Right? And we imagine that we ask youngsters, they can be 15 years old, 16 years old, this one question, simple question. List as much things that are not political. Okay. We do this for 8 or 9 years now, this question. And in Austria, maybe also in Estonia, most things will be alike. If they are really honest, things like this will come. Alcohol, party, a chair, video games, having sex, schnitzel. In Estonia it will be, I don't know, fish or whatever. Sleeping, football. Okay, so they list everything. They list everything what's in their mind. Okay, and then there's a second task to this method. And then we say, okay, now we have a look on what you told us all before. And now really think hard. If you find anything of those things written down, any political link. Because in the very end, we only want to have things on our blackboard or whatever that have really no link to politics. Okay? And what's always happening now is, first people start. For example, they will say, I don't know, I cannot drink because I'm 14, and there's a new age in Austria where the drinking age it's now lowered. I cannot make party everywhere I want. I cannot have it on the time I want. Video games. Oh, there are taxes on video games as well as on every other thing that I can buy. I pay taxes. Who gets the taxes? Politicians get the taxes. They do things with it. You know. I cannot have sex on the streets of Vienna because it's forbidden. Who did this? Politicians. Schnitzel. Schnitzel is also a thing you can buy, so it's taxed. So if in Austria a good schnitzel, it will be 10 to 15 euros, so 10 to 20% goes to politics. Sleeping. Hey guys, you're in a school. When are you allowed to sleep? Can you sleep freely for yourselves when you want? No, I need to go up for school and go take the school bus. And now it's easier to sleep if I have holidays. Is it in all regions in Austria the same? Football. Who is creating this kind of football fields? Who is owning them? The city of Vienna, the city of Tallinn. Who is fostering your small football club? You get maybe a little funding. to make this work. So, in the very end, I'm too quick, Tagasi. In the very end, I tried to make this. You need to imagine now, we have this full blackboard. I tried to make this visually able as a PowerPoint presentation, but it didn't came to Estonia, I think. In the very end, you have a blackboard or a flip chart, and the question lists as much things that are not political. It's empty. It's empty. And then you ask the youngsters, or you can also do it with grown-ups, why is this the thing? Why, when you think of it for a longer term, everything more or less is linked to politics? And then this is what we say to the youngsters. I know there are political scientists and they will have a different opinion on it. Politics is nothing else than the way we organize our lives. There is no country in the world where there's no politics. Maybe there's an area where there's no politics, an island where you decide yourselves when you have the coconut or not. But every time when you need to discuss with others, how should the society look like, it's politics. It's neither a good thing nor a bad thing. It's an essential thing, a human thing to have. And if you cross out everything here now, you have one wonderful thing. You can still say, which many youngsters or grown-ups say, I'm not interested in politics. It's boring. But if you do this, you can no longer say, politics have nothing to do with my life. And this is what we want to get them to learn. And this is the way of working. Feel free to spread this idea. I hope you got it. And I would be finished. Thank you.